I had kind of a slump in 2024 in regards to watching anime. I just didn't feel motivated to watch a lot of shows during the year. While I do get a seasonal or month burnout, I don't think I've ever taken as large of a step back as I did in 2024. I don't know about you, but the reason I have so much backlog is because I constantly keep discovering animes that intrigue me. Even the slightest interesting clip or even illustration promo for an anime will have me catalog it into my backlog. At the end of it all, I just realized that you can't force yourself to do something if you have no motivation to do it, even if it's something that you really love doing. In addition to watching fewer animes than I usually do, I watched much more short animes last year, which really helped me digest them with my lack of motivation to watch. So let's talk about them. In 2024, I watched a total of 11 animes, but only actually finished 9 of them. I'm only counting finished animes because that allows me to talk about them in full rather than trying to discuss something that I haven't even finished, or worse, had no motivation to finish. I actually have a video on that. I'm also including individual seasons into the rankings because I feel like they're worthy to talk about themselves even if they just comprise of a single arc in comparison to a complete anime. Also, anime movies are not included in the list, although I only watched one last year and I actually already made a video on that, so go check that out. After this one, if you're interested of course. And just because an anime isn't super high up on this list doesn't mean that I think it's bad or anything, I just happen to like everything above it more than that anime. I don't really find myself disliking any animes. There's always something for me to like about an anime, and to me the worst that an anime could be is boring, with nothing likable or dislikable about it. So let's talk about some anime. Oh, and varying degrees of spoilers, obviously. I'm not gonna pretend like I've watched a ton of shoujo animes, and shoujo romances even less so, but I thought I'd dip my toes a bit because I did see a trailer for A Sign of Affection when it was first being promoted, and I thought the premise was interesting. The first thing that stood out to me immediately while watching is that this anime is very pretty to look at least to me. I love how the characters look, and when I first started watching it kind of reminded me of how manhwa is drawn, particularly the male characters. A lot of the environments look gorgeous, for example when it's snowing or how the background will sometimes represent how Yuki, the main character, is feeling. I haven't watched any other works by Aja Do, but props to them because the anime looks great. It's not like they have super intricate or technical art, but the consistency and general prettiness of the art really has me singing high praises for it. Now, the main aspect that you're probably curious about, the romance. Most of it is pretty standard. Innocent main girl is lovey-dovey over dreamy main male love interest. Childhood friend also has a crush on main girl, another pair of interests who are conflicted because of main male love interest, and the side love pair. I would say there's only one real standout, and that is of course Yuki's deafness. It is sweet to see Utsuomi's willingness to learn sign language for Yuki, and the relationship is very mushy-gushy romantic. But I don't think Yuki's disability had as much of an impact as I thought it would have on their relationship. Itsuomi seems very quick to pick up on what Yuki wants to communicate to her, and overall the pacing of their relationship seemed a bit too quick for what I expected. The characters themselves, they're all fine. I don't think anyone is particularly written poorly or outlandish, but I found myself not having much to say about most of them. If I were to pick out some characters that I gravitated more towards, those would probably be Oshi and Shin, and Rin is the best girl. You can't change my mind on that. I liked Oshi especially because of the one scene where he helped a deaf man where he forgot something that he dropped. It was cool to see him not just use his sign language to interact with one person and actually using it for some small good. He's not just a complete douche. Hey, good for you, man. But I don't think his use of sign language ever gets to be a more significant role than communicating with Yuki, but that was a nice character moment that I really liked. Poor childhood love rivals. Y'all never win, do you? Shin is another rival, except he's involved in a different love triangle. I think the relationship between him and his love interest Emma was probably the most intriguing to me just because of the dynamic that the two had, and the bigger presence of a middleman in comparison to something like Yuki, Itsuomi, and Oshi. I actually really like how Shin was written, with this sort of masked personality to hide how he truly feels around Emma because she's into Itsuomi. Seeing that play out was probably the most interesting thing for me from the 12 episodes so far. I'd love to see another season, or maybe read the manga depending on how much content there is, and I'd like to see them challenging the relationship between Yuki and Itsuomi. You know, not all that glitters is gold. I'm trying to see some drama and great writing. But for what the anime is for now, I think A Sign of Affection is a fine watch. Not really deep enough to sink into, but still a nice time if you're looking for something short and sweet. I've always thought that Demon Slayer was a fun anime to watch. It's full of spectacle and it's enjoyable in that alone. I don't really have an opinion either way on the quality of the story, but I find it serviceable and engaging enough. Last year's Swordsmith Village arc was okay. Admittedly, I'm just going by memory, but I definitely think that it was the weakest arc slash season that's been adapted so far. And that's probably just the fault of the original source material, which is fine. This year's Hashira training arc, however, was a treat, but there are a couple of negatives. For one, I'm kind of mixed on the actual Hashira training that they showed off. I definitely get the emphasis on the Tengen and Himejima trainings, as they were not only used to introduce and conclude the arcs, but also to flesh out the Hashiras and Tanjiro himself. But in comparison, it feels like a lot of the other Hashira trainings were glossed over. Again, probably a problem with the source material, but I think there could have easily been some filler, if there wasn't already, to make the trainings have a little more meaning to the Demon Slayer Corps or Tanjiro himself. The biggest sin for me was going through 3 Hashira trainings in one episode, Kanroji, Iguru, and Shinazugawa. I really felt that there could have been more to add, particularly to the Iguru and Shinazugawa subplots. These do help the episodes from getting too stale because the pacing is somewhat snappy, but I just feel like it's sort of a double-edged sword. I haven't read the manga, but I do know that the beginning sequence of the very first episode is anime original, and I really like the foreshadowing of the Infinity Castle. It was really cool, but the subplot of Iguru and Shinazugawa knowing about it wasn't really tapped upon much despite this. I hope that they try to do something with that in the Infinity Castle adaptation because I think it would be really cool to keep up with the anime continuity and flesh these characters out a little more. Now for the main dish. Episodes 6 to 8 were immediate bangers. I liked Himejima's backstory to being a Hashira, and you get that classic Demon Slayer that's always delivering sad backstories. Experiencing episodes 7 and 8 back to back, because I watched the season when all the episodes were out, is genuinely some of the most hype that I've experienced last year. To me, I feel like Demon Slayer never fails to deliver on hype, and maybe you can argue that's just from looking at it from a surface level view, but after going through a kind of a rough season and having this climax at the end, it really heightened it for me. The entire battle in episode 8 is awesome. I love seeing all the Hashiras come together plus Tanjiro, and then Muzan appropriately hits them with the "No You," and we get a glimpse into the Infinity Castle arc. The soundtrack in the final episode was awesome, but that's not really a surprise either because I think that the Demon Slayer anime always does well with the big climaxes, just like the Mugen Train and Entertainment District arcs. I'm very excited to see the Infinity Castle adaptation as someone who knows nothing about the manga. The memed anime that was all over anime Twitter, My Dear Friend Nokotan, or known as Shikanoko Noko Noko Koshtantan. Yeah, I just had to say it. I saw the teaser for this when it was announced sometime in early 2024, and I saw a lot of talk about how absurd the teaser trailer looked. So I watched it, and it looked as crazy as everything was making it out to be. What intrigued me even more was that Wit Studio was making it, and my experience with Wit has only been through Attack on Titan and Vivi Fluoride Eye's song, so I was really curious on how they would handle this sort of absurdist comedy slice of life anime. And I enjoyed watching Nokotan. I think it's a really fun watch. Not in the same way as Demon Slayer, but as a slice of life with bizarre happenings mixed in that mostly have a common theme of deers. If you've seen the trailers or even memes about it, then you're gonna get exactly what you expect, and that's not a bad thing, at least to me. I like the characters, for the most part. I think they're fun. Nokotan always getting on Kushitan's nerves, Bashime always doing something with rice, and Anko being Anko. It just feels like a group of pals doing their thing, with the status quo never really changing, which is fine for what it is. For some reason, I was really captivated by the voice acting from this anime, particularly from Nokotan, Bashime, and Neko Yamada. I think they all just sounded so adorable, and I'm a sucker for cute things. I haven't watched the dub, so I unfortunately can't say anything about it, but it's just really heartwarming to hear the characters speak. I didn't really find myself laughing my shorts off, but the anime got a couple of nose exhales out of me, so that's enough for it to be considered mildly funny in my book. If you're not really a fan of comedy animes or slice of life animes, then you probably won't be much of a fan of this either, but if you are, then I think you'll get a decent time out of it. I wouldn't say that it's one of the greatest of all time, but it is one of the dear of all time. I'm a huge Initial D fan, and MF Ghost is the spiritual successor to that series. I even read the manga, and I'm about 20 chapters behind as of writing the script. I don't think it's anywhere near the level of Initial D, but I still really enjoy it. I watched the first season, and I thought it was fine. I just have a natural gravitation towards racing and Eurobeat, and if you put those two things together, my monkey brain is gonna like it. This is more so just going to be me comparing Season 2 to Season 1, and I'm very aware that there is probably not a very significant amount of people who have watched this in comparison to everything else on this list. While the first season focused on the first race of the story, the second season covered the second race, naturally, and even continued into the beginning of the third race. From a visual standpoint, this season is a significant step up, which is sort of due to the convenience of the race taking place during the rain, so the weather fills up more of the background. At least that's what it feels like to me. In Season 1, there was a real lack of interesting environments during the race, and because they take place during the day and not night like Initial D, it only exposes how dull the sets looked. The added details of the water splashing as the cars are constantly driving through the rain and the grime on the cars adds to that liveliness too. The 2D art is good. I think even Season 1 was fine with that, and the art style hasn't really changed from what I could see. Since I never talked about Season 1 so far on the channel, I'd like to say that the anime definitely made Shigeno's style look more casual friendly, which is not necessarily a positive or negative to me. Shigeno's current style is very unique, but I can also understand that some may be put off by it, so I think that this art style change for the anime definitely makes it more consumable for some. Eurobeat selection? I'm kind of mixed. It is definitely overall better than Season 1's, and I recognized almost all of the tracks because a lot of them are popular songs from the SCP music label, which kind of added into that hype factor, but I'm a little mixed on the reusing of songs that were already in Initial D, that being Speed Lover. It's a nice nod to the fans, but it could also give off the impression that they're being sort of limited with the selection of songs that they have. There's probably some limitations due to licensing and whatnot, but there's a lot of other good music, even from the labels that they're already pulling from, that I feel like they could use. I mean, just look at the Initial D Dreams collections from a few years ago. And I'm aware that a lot of the tracks used for Season 2 were also used in some of the Initial D arcade stage games, but I'm just saying that they've got a whole arsenal, and hopefully for Season 3 they could push out some underseen bangers if licensing allows for it. Although I guess this does mean that we'll finally get Burning Like Fire and Baby I'm on Fire on streaming services, so I can't be too mad. Now most importantly, the racing and story themselves. If you're a fan or you've watched or read MF Ghost, then I'm surely not the first person to tell you that the writing in this series is very flawed. That sounds like it could be a video for the future. Huh. I mean, are we really supposed to assume that a lot of the top 15 drivers in Japan are not very experienced with rain? The fog I understand, but I mean come on, it's a little pathetic. But the racing is still very fun to watch regardless, at least for me, and I think it could probably be for you too if you just wanted to shut your brain off and watch some cars go zoom. I don't know where I'm going to be able to mention this, so I'll do it here. They low-key baited us hard with the Manazuru Peninsula race. Around the time that the Ashinoko GT race finished, or was about to finish in the anime, they released the trailer for the continuation of Season 2, and they were showing the Manazuru Peninsula. I was so shocked. I was like, is this season actually going to be like 24 episodes? I was really excited, and then the 12th episode came out, the race begun, and it turns out that we're gonna have to wait for Season 3 anyways. What's the deal with that? I don't know if this is a mistranslation, but Google translating the tweet of the trailer says production decision. So maybe they wanted to keep moving forward with season 2, but they must have changed their minds for some reason. Whatever the reason is, I just hope that they can use this time to polish everything more so that I can enjoy some good car racing Eurobeat action. We kinda need MF Ghost to keep thriving for the sake of the racing/car anime and manga genre. I'm really excited for season 3, and I think it could even be the best one so far, so I'll be staying tuned for that. I found out about School Live, or Gakogurashi, through a random recommended video that I came across in 2020 that talked about the manga, and I was intrigued because of the contrast between the bright and cute cast and personalities and the dark dystopian world that they're set in. Probably not a groundbreaking concept to some, but it was the first time that I was exposed to something like that. So fast forward to August 2024 and I finally decided to watch the anime, after 4 years of putting it off, and I thought it was pretty good. I want to preface that I'm not a horror fan, and what turns me away even more is cute things or characters being put in apocalyptic, life-threatening situations. Like, it's the kind of situation that makes you beg that nothing bad happens to the characters, but that obviously can't be in a series designed around this kind of thing. Let's start with the obvious deception in the first episode, that this is some cutesy slice-of-life world where the characters apparently live at school. I got some real Madoka Magica vibes from this, and they spend the entire episode making it seem like everything is great in the world, until the plot twist at the end. But what I like about this is that the purpose isn't just to be some shocking bait and switch, but actually demonstrates how one of the main characters, Yuki, sees the world through her delusions. This is one series that I really don't want to spoil too much, but over the course of the anime you get to see how those delusions affect those around her and even moments of self-awareness. It's really interesting because it's pretty open-ended on whether or not these really are delusions, or her way of making good out of a bad situation, or even a mix of the two. Without going too deep into spoilers, I really enjoyed the story. All of the characters are well written and serve their purpose. Now, maybe I'm only thinking this just because I don't watch much horror at all, but this anime is really good at building tension. Almost every episode, it's like you're waiting for the big bad event to happen, and even during the grace period, you still feel on edge because you don't know what's going to happen. I felt the suspense all throughout the anime, and that's something that I think School Live does really well. As you'd probably expect from a post-apocalyptic show like this, it has its fair shares of tearjerkers, and let me just say that I found myself sobbing more than a handful of times, whether it be out of distress or sadness or even despair. It's not all doom and gloom though despite the apocalyptic threat, and there are still those happy slice-of-life moments that give you hope and feel good, which creates a good balance from the dystopian mood. If it was all bleak, then I'm sure this series would not have stood out as much, but it takes advantage of that cutesy guise and lets you breathe. I think these moments help you care a lot more for the characters because you just get to see them be them, if that makes any sense. One of my favorite moments from the anime is when they decided to make letters and send them out through balloons to let people know that they're still alive and well. And something about that wholesomeness along with the knowledge that they're still in such a desperate situation made me tear up because it really was like finding the good in the bad. The sight of the bright balloons flying through a now desolate city with the peaceful music in the background, it's a great representation of those blissful moments. I've heard that the manga is also really good, and actually has some important moments that weren't present in the anime, so I'll definitely have to read it one day. If you're looking for a good psychological thriller with some slice of life to balance it out, then go check this one out. In spring 2021, I watched Clannad and Clannad After Story, and it was one of the most heartfelt experiences that I ever had the pleasure of watching. It was full of comfiness and emotions all throughout, and it made me cry 5 times in a row while binging. It really had an impact on me in realizing more of my taste in anime, what I'm a sucker for, and kind of wanting to be closer to my family. In December 2023, I watched the 2006 version of Kanon, and while a lot of the elements were very similar to Clannad, I still found myself enjoying it and getting to see all of the girls go through their resolutions. And it was the first and so far only time that I have ever ugly cried at an anime. So after seeing those two, I knew that in the summer of 2024, I had to finish the Holy Trinity of Key series by watching Air. After watching the two previously mentioned Key adaptations, I don't think Air really stands out in its core elements, of which I mean various cute heroines with their own arcs, supernatural powers, and the typical Nakige moments. But that doesn't necessarily make Air a bad anime, and this is a predecessor to Kanon and Clannad. The biggest standout from the rest would obviously be the story and its themes. Air's general themes of the sky and maternal bonds are a big focus. And out of the Key trio, Air's story is definitely the most fantasy bulk. For example, from the very beginning, the main character Yukito claims that his puppetry is magic, which certainly would explain the unique movements that his puppet pulls off, but because of the common understanding of puppetry, it's sort of assumed that there's gotta be some kind of trick, even though Yukito doesn't use any strings, and then the use of magic is actually confirmed later on in the story. Now, while Kanon and Clannad did have supernatural elements, they didn't feel completely out of left field to me because they didn't fully take center stage, and it wasn't as big of a focus in comparison to the other themes from their respective stories. In Air, however, it feels like the fantasy portion is supposed to be the bulk of the story, which isn't what I expected. That's not to say that it's a bad thing, but I'm used to Key's writing being focused on the morals and themes, but in Air, in the anime at least, it feels like the fantastical journey was the main takeaway. Maybe I'm delusional, but that's just what I felt while watching. Perhaps we can chalk it up to growing writing pains. The main heroines and Yukito all get their own arcs as you'd expect if you've seen Kanon or Clannad. To be honest, if you've seen either of those, then you're definitely going to see some similarities in the characteristics of this cast. Angsty main character but with a good heart, innocent and clumsy girl, the Dandere, a Kusogaki, the sisters, and a parent figure. Wow, they really do mean it when they say, if you've seen one, you've seen them all. That's not to say that they're terrible characters, but definitely not as much of a standout and definitely less well written than the other two from the Key trio. I was actually kind of hesitant on how the story would fare because this is a 12 episode anime in contrast to Kanon and Clannad, which were about 24 and almost 50 episodes. I didn't know how long the original visual novel was at the time, which, looking back at it, might have justified the short run. But I was still concerned in seeing how well the story would flow considering the 12 episode run. I think the pacing is fine enough even with the short run, and I think it's able to have some good depth, particularly in the overarching storyline. Now, how did Air fare in terms of making me cry? Because I think that's a very strong telling of how much I got into it. This anime just nearly missed the mark of making me ugly cry during the final episode. Tears were coming down, but not enough to make me look like Tyrese Gibson. I won't give any examples just for spoilers' sake, but if you've seen any other Key works and cried at those, then expect to do so from this one as well. As usual, Kyoto Animation did a great job on both the art and animation. If you aren't much of a fan of that 2000s big eye look, then this will probably turn you off even more in comparison to Kanon and Clannad, since this is a little more dated than those. Just like those two, the soundtrack is taken straight from the visual novel, and I think it's great. Jun Maeda and the team have done wonders, and I don't think a Jun Maeda soundtrack can sound bad, at least going off of these three works and Angel Beats. Overall, I think Air is a very solid anime, and if you're the type of person looking for that 2000s aesthetic with good animation, a solid story, and something to cry at, then I would recommend watching this. If you ask me what my most anticipated anime for 2024 was, then Dandadan would be the immediate answer. I heard about Dandadan in a video by the Anime Man where he talked about the first chapter and had high praise for it. I was intrigued, and in 2022 I bought the first volume, yet never actually read it. And then the anime got teased in 2023 and I was really excited for it. So in May of this year, I decided to read the manga and I thought it was peak fiction. I really loved the story, action, characters, and especially the art, so I was even more excited to see the adaptation. And a little later in August, me and a couple of friends attended an anime convention, Anime NYC, and we got to see a special premiere of the first episode in English, along with a panel featuring the English and Japanese voice actors, as well as some of the production staff, which was really awesome. And it left me wanting more immediately, but I would have to wait until its official release in October. So, how was the adaptation? Let's talk about the story first. I think Dandadan is very fun, in that there's a lot of everything for everyone. You've got supernatural powers and fighting, slice of life, romance, heartfelt moments, and comedy. To me, none of it ever feels boring or lame or cringe. It's all good fun, and the pacing never feels like it's too slow or going by too fast. I actually thought they were gonna end the first season after the acrobatic Silky arc. I don't know why, I just thought they could have done like filler episodes or something, but I guess that's just a thing of the past. I did not think they were gonna have Gigi in the first season, so seeing him in the trailer for the anime really shocked me because I know there was no way that they were gonna be able to fit that arc in the anime. And they didn't, because they leave off at sort of the rising action of the arc. I think it's an interesting choice to do that, but I suppose it could have also been due to already having adapted everything else and still needing to fill the 12 episode quota. If I had a nickel for every anime on this list that begun their next arc on the last episode of the season, I'd have 3 nickels. Now, the animation is top tier. This is far and away the best animation that I've seen from all the animes that I watched this year. Science Saru was the animation studio, and while I haven't watched any of their works, I have seen some clips of Devilman Crybaby and the Scott Pilgrim anime, which look pretty good to me, so I had high expectations. Even from watching the trailer, I thought that the animation was going to be very promising, and it delivered on that. The art style is great as well. I have no real qualms with it. Something that I noticed is that the day scenes tend to have a lot more flat coloring, while the night scenes do have that more detailed shading, which is pretty cool. I think the anime does Tatsu's drawings absolute justice, just from the normal shots to some of the most beautiful scenes that are very faithful to how the manga portrays them. You did good, Science Saru. You did good. I think the music was handled really well, and I've heard Kensuke Ushio's music before on Chainsaw Man, so I had high expectations. I think his work on Dandadan is great, and a lot of the more memorable tracks have a good balance between matching the mood of the situation and getting you to feel the emotions that the story and composer call for. That balance is what makes a great soundtrack in my book. You can definitely tell there's a more hip-hop focused inspiration in a lot of the more upbeat tracks, which give it that funk. Paranormal funk, if you will. It's like Ushio took the adjective urban and personified that into music. I am absolutely looking forward to season 2, and the wait is not too long from now. This was definitely one of the best works to come out in 2024, and is definitely worthy of the top 3 spot. My second favorite anime that I watched this year is Gurren Lagann. Gurren Lagann is just awesome. I've always heard that Gurren Lagann was an absolute banger, and it's been on my radar for quite some time now. I've been meaning to watch more animes by Trigger, but so far I've only gotten around to Kill la Kill. And yes, I know that Gurren Lagann is by Gainax, but they're related, I think, so it doesn't matter. So seeing all of the praise and knowing that it was a Trigger anime, my expectations were high. And let's just say that they drilled through my expectations. Following the topic about the studio behind the anime, let's talk about the animation. As I expected, the animation was superb. I'm not an artist, so I can't exactly articulate what I like about it, but everything looks great. The art and the action scenes especially. Except for episode 4. Although from what I understand, there was some trouble behind the scenes and the show was running behind schedule, and there were budgeting issues. But besides that, there's no qualms for me. The soundtrack is great overall, and I really like the hip-hop/rap leitmotif for the transitions that eventually combine with the orchestral part of the soundtrack to culminate into what is Libera Me From Hell. If that isn't one of the most banger tracks that I've heard from an anime, then I don't know what is. I love Libero Me from Hell, especially, and I'm aware that that's not a hidden gem or anything, but I just wanted to also feed into the opinion that that song is amazing. Taku Iwasaki was the composer for the anime, and knowing his work on Soul Eater and JoJo Part 2, I think his work here was also fantastic. What I love most about Gurren Lagann is its message. The drive to surpass things that you think are impossible and believing in yourself, no matter what obstacles or forces blocking your path or bringing you down, you can achieve your goal, and it all starts with you. This is the message that is constantly plastered throughout the series. As corny as it might seem, I genuinely think that there are people whose lives can be literally changed by taking the anime's message to heart. As a viewer, you get to see that being proven time and time again. Even though it's just fiction, the message that Gurren Lagann presents is one that is very real. And for a brief time, it even helped me get motivated into running. For about 2 weeks. But it was still the fire that got me going, and I'll never forget how epic it was watching the final climax and everything leading up to it. I haven't watched the movies, which as far as I know are abridged versions of the anime with some touch-ups, and I hear that the second movie especially is amazing, so I'll have to check that out sometime. I know I didn't have much to say about Gurren Lagann in comparison to some of the other animes on this list, but it's just a simple masterpiece. There isn't much more for me to say because it's just that good to me. Gurren Lagann is an easy S tier anime for me, and it is totally deserving of the number 2 spot for the year. Girls Band Cry is my favorite anime that I watched in 2024. Before I get into my thoughts about it, I want to highlight something interesting about when the anime first got teased. I remember when the first promotional art got shown on Twitter, there were a good amount of people hating on it just because it was another anime featuring a girl band. Mind you, this was around the time that people were still coming off the hype of Bocchi the Rock, which was another anime about a girl band. While I understand the perspective of seeing this as a way to cash in on the trend, it would be hypocritical to hate on it just from the reveal alone. Just look at K-On!, Bandori, Idolmaster, Love Live, Zombieland Saga, or literally any other music girl group franchises that are out there. They were all cashing in on the market. I know that's a pretty cynical way of wording it, but I couldn't exactly find the right words for it. Also, this project started as far back as 2019, which is insane to think about, and goes to show that this isn't just a Bocchi ripoff. Anyways, that's my little rant for this video. So, what makes Girls Band Cry so great to me? Well, let's start with the animation. Toei Animation is the studio behind the anime, and is also the production company that started Girls Band Cry as a multimedia project. If it wasn't already obvious by what I'm showing on screen, or if you're just listening, the majority of the animation used is CG, and it looks amazing. Not only is the CG animation very fluid, but the anime takes advantage of it and makes the characters and movements very expressive at times. It also helps that the CG doesn't look out of place at all. From nailing the lighting and shadows to designing the backgrounds around the CG, it looks great. The musical numbers where the characters are performing look excellent too, and the animation is used to its fullest advantage to get a lot of dynamic shots that definitely would have been harder in 2D animation. And there's something about the direction of these segments that also make you really feel like you're watching a music video of an actual band. Not to say that they aren't, because they are, we'll get into that, but if you watch the anime then I'm sure you know what I mean. Toei in general has been slowly using more CG animation in their works recently, and the progress shows. Despite there being, or at least used to, be a stigma towards CGI in anime, there have been some crazy strides in recent years that prove it can look great and are not just a cost-effective measure. There is still 2D animation present, but outside of the opening and ending, it's only really used for more static shots with a lot of people, or reminiscing on a character's past than anything. There's not much to say about it. The 2D animation isn't great, but the art itself is fine. It's not something that I'd even take as a negative anyway because it was never the focus to begin with. And I mean, the animators likely didn't want to have to make a bunch of models or altering existing ones just for certain scenes, so I can give them a pass on that. Moving on to the story and writing, Girls Band Cry feels very grounded, which is part of why I think its storytelling is so strong. Not only is the journey of wanting to pursue your dreams something that people can relate to, but the characters are flawed, not so much from a writing perspective, but from a human perspective. These characters aren't all goody two-shoes. They banter a lot and honestly have a lot of internal conflict and baggage that makes them feel all the more realistic. Nina is a prime example of this show's writing because she's an emotional and impulsive teenager. She's often rude to others and makes decisions spontaneously and not mature a lot of the time. She does eventually grow to accept her peers and circumstances to a certain extent, but this emo side of her really coincides well with her singing and the lyrics in a lot of the songs. She's rebellious and wants nothing more than to be in a band because she's passionate about singing. Her groundedness helps with her relatability, and that's something that could be said with all of the characters. Everyone's internal and collective struggles all have a very real feeling, and it makes it all the more satisfying when they come to their resolutions. Even if you can't relate to the characters' circumstances, they all feel very genuine, and it makes the emotional parts of the anime hit that much harder, and I was certainly feeling it in a handful of parts. Finally, let's talk about the music. The non-vocal tracks that play all throughout the anime are really fitting. A lot of them fit that indie rock vibe which goes hand in hand with the Roku leitmotif of the anime. I even got some American football and toe vibes at times. It's very fitting that the music, what the GBC project is focused on, helps the anime stand out. Now, the vocal tracks. It's no surprise that there's a handful of them considering the nature of how the anime is focused on music, and they're all great. I'm probably biased, and I don't actually know that much about the workings and makings of music, but the songs in this anime and the band in general are really a pleasure to listen to. They're all great J-rock songs, and if you're a fan of the genre, then you'll definitely get a kick out of this. Now, I'm not gonna act like I've listened to a bunch of J-rock outside of like 1OK Rock and Yorness, but Togenashi Togiri, the in-universe and IRL band behind these songs, has a distinct sound that separates them from a lot of the other bands that I've heard in the genre. The two things that I can point out with my limited knowledge of music are the keyboard and main vocalist. I think that the use of the keyboard in these songs really adds another layer that makes these songs sound unique more than you might think, a seemingly classical instrument being used in the rock genre. I also love Nina, or Rina, the IRL vocalist's voice. To me, you can hear the raw emotion but also the well-trained voice that she has, which also fits very well into the character's emotional self. In the context of the anime, you really get the feeling that Nina's just letting it all out as the emotional and impulsive teenager that she is. And of course, the other band members are great too, and it's pretty evident especially when it comes to the solos. I know this is getting a bit off topic from the anime, but I think the band's identity as an actual real-life band also adds to the impressiveness of it all. Yes, all of the members of the band in the anime actually play in the same band in real life, and they all play their respective instruments. That's not something that you could say for a lot of anime bands. While on the topic of the IRL band, the anime was also their first time voice acting, which is also very impressive because I think they did a great job in the anime. I don't think anyone stands out as particularly amateurish to my untrained ear, and they also sound natural. It really adds to that groundedness that the anime has. The seiyu's natural sounding voices also really help the emotional moments hit harder because it doesn't feel over the top. This being everyone's first time voice acting also helped these characters in their distinctness. Girls Band Cry as a whole is so well done. Nothing, and I mean nothing about it ever feels rushed, or lazy, or compromised. You can feel the passion of everyone that worked on the anime, and it's amazing to see the amount of success on such an ambitious project. I really can't say more on how great this anime is, and if anything that I've said has interested you, and you haven't seen it, please go and watch Girls Band Cry. Well, that was a handful, wasn't it? If you've stuck all the way up to this point, then I thank you for deeming me worthy of your time, or background audio. If you're watching this around the time that it comes out, then this is obviously the longest project that I have ever done, even from my previous channel. I started scripting this all the way back in November, and I've just been on and off it as the months went by. I was supposed to finish this video by January 31st, but well, would you look at the date? It is indeed February. Ah well, at least it's out now, and that's a huge burden off my shoulders. Will I do another one of these for 2025? Well, we'll just have to see. If you noticed a real lack of smoke alarm beeping in the last segment of this video, that's because I'm recording somewhere else. And no, I have not changed the batteries at home. The next video that I do will certainly be nowhere near the length of this one. And now that this is done, we will return to our regularly unscheduled programming. Maybe I'll see you again, and take care.